Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist BBQ. I'm Jeremy Yoder, and today we're going to continue to put this Old Country Barbecue Pit's gravity-fed smoker through its paces. And we did ribs already, and they turned out phenomenally well. And now I got to try the next step up, a pork butt. So this is going to be a longer cook, and so I want to see how well it renders fat and what kind of smoke flavor it produces. Because I'm testing this smoker out, I want to take away all of the different variables that might affect the final product. So I'm keeping everything very simple. All I'm doing is taking a bone-in pork butt, and make sure you get bone-in, because if you get boneless, a lot of times it's easily dried out and it doesn't produce as good a product in the end. So a bone-in pork butt with the fat cap on. Then I score that fat cap and season with salt and pepper. The reason I score the fat cap is because I found that it renders that fat better and produces a juicier product in the end. When you mix it all together and pull the pork, you get, phenomenally moist stuff at the end, which is what you're going after. So just salt and pepper, a 50-50 mix, and then we're going to put it on the smoker. And today I'm going to be cooking, again, I think at 300 degrees, because that worked super well for the ribs and nothing burned. And I think the reason nothing burns is because there's not a huge amount of airflow, so nothing dries out too quickly. It's just an easy way to smoke meat. So we're going to put this guy on at 300 degrees, and let's check back in about 2 hours. So this pork butt is nothing special, but we want to see how this produces color and the ultimate flavor it produces, how well it renders fat, and just the overall quality of barbecue that you produce. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how this thing has been working in the test cooks that I've been doing. With all that being said, let's put it on, and then we'll check back in a couple hours. Now, for you guys who are following along and want to try to recreate exactly what I'm doing today, we're going to be cooking at 300, like I said, and I'm using hickory chunks. And in the chute, I just have regular, plain old Kingsford briquettes. Briquettes just seem to feed better through it than lump charcoal. If you kind of break up the lump charcoal into smaller pieces, I'm sure that would work too. But just for ease of use, just standard, basic Kingsford briquettes, so that, it's kind of a known quantity. It's not something that, I'm worried about at all. It's just got to work like clockwork. Now, I'm using hickory chunks. I'll put in a baseball-sized chunk about every 30 minutes or so, and as those coals fall down, it's going to start to ignite those chunks and provide wood smoke flavor to the meat on the inside. To start off, I start with 2 of those chunks. So right now, there are 2 chunks underneath that grate, so the ashes fall down on them and ignite them. So that's how I start off, and then in probably 30 to 45 minutes, I'll add another one and continue that on until it's time to wrap the meat. Okay, it's been a couple of hours now, so let's take a look at the color that we've got on this pork butt, and then I'll check the temperature. My guess is that it's already going to be close to 160, but I don't really know that for sure. It's just, in my experience, this thing cooks very quickly, and because there's not a ton of airflow, nothing burns. So let's check it out. As you can see, the internal temperature was nowhere close to 160, but I had to take a guess and just see what happens. But it's at 120 degrees after only about 2.5 hours or so, so that's still cooking pretty quickly. And the other thing is, nothing is burning at all. So those are 2 great things. Also, it's starting to get really good reddish color, and I think that's going to continue to darken the longer we let this thing cook unwrapped. Now, I want to address a couple things about this smoker itself. In the comments, people have been asking me a few questions. Number one is, when it's time to shut this thing down, if I close the vents, does that choke off the fire? Yes. You close the intake, you close the exhaust right here, and the fire dies out pretty rapidly. So no problem there, easiest thing in the world to shut down. Another question people have is, well, can I put, a fan system, something that's connected to a temperature probe? There are a lot of different models available, and yes, you can do that. But here's the thing. In my opinion, you probably don't need to, because once you get the intake dialed in to the right amount of air coming in, it holds rock steady at that temperature. Now, one big difference between the prototype and this one is you can open the intake wide open, and this thing might hit, I don't know, maybe 400 degrees or so. But with the prototype, if you left everything wide open, the inside of that cooker would be like 750 degrees, and it just blazing hot. So this one moderates it, and I think it's because the deflection plate in the bottom, it's just a really good cooker for low and slow barbecue. And then finally, I think that this is probably best used at higher temperatures. I just think you get better bark because you can accumulate bark in a number of different ways. First is the amount of smoke. And so this doesn't produce a ton of smoke like you would get with, say, an offset smoker. So we're still in pursuit of bark. Number two is the airflow can kind of dry out the exterior and help form that bark. And we don't have tons of airflow. And the third thing is a higher temperature can also help you achieve better bark. So because we don't have tons of airflow and because we don't have tons of smoke, we're going to use a higher temperature to achieve the outside bark that we really want. And the beauty of the whole thing is because those other things aren't present, huge amount of smoke or huge airflow, we can cook at a higher temperature without risking anything burning or anything getting ruined. And finally, because you can cook at a higher temperature, you can choose exactly how much smoke you want to put in. So if you don't use any wood chunks, you're getting just pure heat going through the cooker. If you're using a lot of wood chunks, you get a lot more smoke flavor. So if you know your cook is going to be shorter, you can feed in more wood chunks so that you get the appropriate level of smoke flavor. Those are kind of the highlights in my experience with this thing so far. I love this thing. I prefer it to the prototype. The prototype was huge and you could fit a ton of food on there. But this thing seems to be really dialed in well to maintain temperatures and work great for low and slow barbecue. It's been about 6 hours now and I just temped this thing. It's about 173 degrees internal. So it's going to be time to wrap. Now, just looking at it kind of in the shade in the smoker here, I couldn't really get a great view of the bark or the color. It looks like it's darkened up some and it's still got nice color. I prefer to have a little darker color still, but we're only going to really be able to evaluate it once we get it out in the light. So let's get it out and take a look. All right, so a couple things we see here. This fat on the top has really started to render well. The color is kind of a deep red. I prefer it to be darker, so I think if I do this again, I'm going to use more wood chunks more frequently just to try to get more color. This is great. It's all just kind of translucent and just gives way. And then another telltale sign is the fat on the top has split. So that in combination with the temperature means it's time to wrap it. So we're going to wrap in a double layer of foil. And everything looks nice and juicy, nice and moist. I mean, squeeze it and juice just comes squirting out of it. Looks awesome. So let's wrap it and finish it off. This looks great. Looks about the size of burritos I get from Chipotle. So I hope I enjoy eating this as much as I do those. One other thing is nothing looks like it's burning, which is incredible because on my offset, if I'm cooking these things at 300, 315, stuff is going to burn. This, not one bit of burnt anything on there, so I'm excited about that. The smell is great. I just wish the color were darker. We're going to ultimately see in the final flavor. One other thing I forgot to address earlier, but a question that I've been getting pretty frequently is, if you fill up the chute all the way with charcoal, how long does that last? Well, I haven't done a cook that's taken that long yet. But I talked to the people at Old Country. They said about 12 to 15 hours, depending on the temperature that you're cooking at. So I think in that time you can cook a brisket, you can cook a pork butt, you can cook ribs, you can cook chicken. So I don't think if you fill it up, you'll ever really need to reload the charcoal for a single cook. Another thing, though, you might want to keep in mind is you probably don't want to overfill the chute, because if you fill up the chute completely and then you're only cooking chicken for, 40 minutes or something, you're going to have a whole bunch of charcoal left in that chute. And to restart it, you have a couple different options. One of those being pull all the charcoal back out. I'm going to get into more of how to restart it later in a separate video, but just keep in mind you probably don't want to fill the thing up all the way unless you're going to use all that charcoal. One other thing I forgot is somebody asked me in the comments, when did I switch from using butcher paper to using foil? Well, for pork, I've always used foil. So if I'm doing pork ribs, I use foil. If I'm doing pulled pork, I use foil. If I'm cooking beef, like say beef ribs or brisket, I always wrap that in butcher paper because I'm trying to preserve the bark more on that than in something like ribs or pork butt. All right, 9 hours later, we are done. So I just temped this thing. It was just a shade over 200 degrees and we pulled it out and let it rest for a little bit to cool down. But I can't wait anymore, and the light is not going to cooperate with this, and the flavor is going to be unaffected. So what I'm looking for here is the final color the flavor that I get, that's the most important, and then also moisture. Because some cookers end up producing more moisture in the meat, the better fat render, that is, than other cookers. So I want to see what those combination of factors looks like when I cook a pork butt in the gravity-fed smoker. So let me unwrap this and let's see what it's like. It's a lot of juice. Now, just looking at this, I see that there's lots of moisture, which is great. This fat is rendered beautifully, but I see that the color isn't very dark. Typically, I like the color to be darker, but the ultimate test, the ultimate measure is going to be flavor. So when I was adding wood chunks, I was kind of cautious because I don't want to over smoke the meat, because in non-offset types of cookers, if you use too much wood, a lot of times you can get a bitter or just an off-putting flavor on the meat. I haven't had any of that issue at all with the gravity fed, but I just wanted to be cautious and not ruin something. But I used more wood for sure than I would with, ribs or something like that. And this will be a good, learning experience for when I do a brisket, which is next. So let me pull off a piece. Actually, let's see if this is done properly. I'm going to pull out the bone, and if the bone comes out clean, then that'll tell us we did it right. All right, that looks perfect. Really happy with that. All right, so for the best possible taste test, I'm gonna grab some from the money muscle over here. Let's see. Yeah, that looks pretty tender. So that looks great. Nice and juicy. We have smoke ring on the outside there. Not too thick of a smoke ring, but ultimately, doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters how it tastes. So let me grab a chunk here that I can eat in one bite, and we're gonna find out. Here we go. Smells really good. That's really good. All right, I'm going to take another bite. That was very tasty, but let me just confirm. That's really good. Okay, so let me give you my breakdown of what we've got here. Okay, so perfectly juicy. I mean, if you cook a pork butt and it's this juicy every time, you're going to be satisfied every single time. So very happy with that. Nothing's burnt. I mean, it just was a great cook. Now, here are the issues. And I think this was my fault rather than the cooker's fault. But I'm going to try it in the future and see how it goes. I think I didn't use enough wood. And I think I should have known that because the color wasn't as dark as I wanted. And while color doesn't necessarily tell you if something has smoke or not, it's a proxy measurement for smoke flavor that you put on the meat. So I think I should have used more wood chunks. I should have been less conservative with that. And I would have gotten better color, better bark, and ultimately better smoke flavor. Now here's the thing about the smoke flavor. The smoke flavor that's on there is really, really good. Now, if you've eaten a lot of barbecue, you know the difference between good smoke and bad smoke. Essentially what that means is smoke produced at a high temperature and smoke produced at a low temperature. And this is good smoke. So I'm only left wanting more of it. If you had bad smoke, then you know. You eat like one bite of it, and then you're like, oh, that's good. And then you eat another bite and you think, yeah, that's okay, I guess. And the more of it you eat, the worse you feel, and you don't want to eat it anymore. This has great smoke flavor. So in the future, and for the next cook I do on this, which is going to be a brisket, I know in my head, okay, I'm going to be adding a chunk of wood, not every 30 or 45 minutes, but probably every 15 to 25 minutes. So I'm going to double the amount of wood while it's unwrapped. Other than that, I have no complaints. It was just a user error on this one, I think. But we aren't going to know until we actually dial up the amount of wood that we use and see the results in a brisket cook.
I'm recording now. Go.
The outside is so good. All right. Now, I'm sure all of you out there wanted to hear that this was an absolutely perfect cook. And I wish it would have been a perfect cook. But I never want to misrepresent what actually happens with these cooks that I do. So there are some times when I feel like I nailed it. And then other times where I'm like, I should have changed this. But I want you to get the honest view of whatever's happening. I'm not going to sit here and say, this was the most amazing smoke flavor of all time. Because you guys deserve the truth, and so I want to give you the truth, even if it's not the greatest thing ever. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still very good. If I went to a barbecue joint and had this, I would be very happy. So, it's not bad by any means. It just definitely could be better. And when I do the brisket cook, I'm going to use this information to inform how I do that cook in the future. So, that was the unvarnished truth. I hope it's helpful to you guys. And if you're going to get one of these, you're going to use it, I hope this information helps you to produce better barbecue every time you use it in the future. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button down below and make sure to subscribe to the channel. But don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I put out new videos. Also, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mad Scientist BBQ. I'll see you guys next time.